What's up, Arc Junkies? Welcome back to the show. This week's guest is Jesse Perrone. Jesse has a pretty diverse background when it comes to welding, to include structural steel ironwork, plumbing and pipe fitting, and he's also a CWI. He started his journey in a fab shop and worked his way into the ironworkers, but later got into pipe welding to increase his earning potential. We'll get right into his story after a quick word from our supporters. Today's episode of the Arc Junkies Podcast is brought to you by CK Worldwide, the seasoned veterans in TIG welding since 1967. CK Worldwide has been honing their craft and delivering top-notch torches, parts, and accessories for decades, longer than most of us have been alive. If you haven't experienced the CK Flex Lock torch yet, you're in for a treat. Imagine a torch with a head that can rotate a full 360 degrees. Talk about versatility. Whether you prefer gas or water-cooled models, CK's got you covered. And let's not forget about their SuperFlex cables, offering unparalleled flexibility and durability, ensuring you can tackle any project with ease. But that's not all. CK Worldwide continues to innovate with products like their Gas Saver kits featuring glass nozzles for improved gas flow coverage, and visibility while saving on gas consumption. Plus, their latest MT375 AC/DC welding machine comes complete with a water cooler and cart for ultimate convenience. When it comes to TIG welding, CK Worldwide sets the standard. We're also brought to you by Outlaw Leather. Are you in search of premium leather welding gear and accessories? Look no further than Outlaw Leather. Outlaw specializes in crafting custom leather welding hoods, arm pads, bolt bags, sleever bar holders, tool belts, and a wide range of custom welding accessories. Each piece is handcrafted with precision and designed to withstand the toughest conditions. But that's not all. Outlaw Leather also stocks essential PPE for welding, ensuring you stay safe on the job. Plus, they offer a selection of quality hand tools you can trust. Visit outlawleather.com today to explore their extensive range of products. Whether you're a professional welder or a DIY enthusiast, Outlaw has you covered. And the best part is, as a listener of the Arc Junkies podcast, you can save 15% off on all in-stock leather goods when you use code word ARCJunkies in the discount box at checkout. Outlaw Leather is your trusted source for custom leather welding gear, PPE, and quality hand tools. Elevate your welding game today with Outlaw Leather. All right, you know what time it is. Fire up your machine, drop your hood, and turn me up 5.
Thank you for downloading show number 325 of the Arc Junkies Podcast.
You're listening to the Arc Junkies Podcast, helping you make every weld better than your last with each episode. And now your host, Jason Becker.
So, Jesse, you've got a pretty interesting background when it comes to welding. You've done a little bit of ironwork. You've done some pipe fitting, do some inspection work. How did you get into all this?
I kind of just bounced around quite a bit. I mean, after I got out of welding school, I got right into the Ironworkers Union. I actually worked in a fab shop for a few months. I was in the Ironworkers Union, but they didn't have any work for me at the time. So I started in the fab shop. As soon as the ironworkers called me, I went right out to work for them. And I did steel work for about 3 years. And then I jumped over to the pipe fitters union, and it was pretty much just money. I was just kind of chasing, more money. I kind of got spoiled right out of welding school. I ended up, after about 6 months in the ironworkers union, I went down to Kentucky. I got laid off in New York. I went down to Kentucky and I got on a job making pretty good money. And I'd only been in the field for like 8 months maybe, but I was making really good money, and that kind of spoiled me. So ever since that job, pretty much, I've been working to get kind of back to that pay scale. And it took me quite a while. That's kind of why I bounced around. I did a lot of like part-time jobs, teaching. I got into that. Which I really liked, but that was all. It was a job, I wanted more money. And then I also did blacksmith work on the weekends. I worked for a guy for about 2 years every Saturday. And that was super awesome. I loved it. But again, it was money, I was just trying to work pretty much.
So money motivated.
Pretty much. Yeah. I've just kind of been chasing that next check or the next highest amount of money I can make. And I've had quite a few good paying jobs on the road. I have traveled quite a bit. But that's stressful, like relationship and stuff. So I try to find that balance of like making a good check, but not being away from home every week. And with my new job now, I work for a gas utility, which has kind of been interesting the last year or so. So I feel like I've kind of found the balance a little bit. I work a lot of hours, but I am making the money that I want and I'm able to stay home. So I kind of feel like I'm in a good spot now.
Yeah. What hall were you with the Ironworkers Union and pipe fitters? Like what state? You're up in Vermont, right?
Yeah, so I live in Vermont now. I'm a New Yorker originally, so I went to welding school in Utica, New York. And I got into the Ironworkers Union Local 440, which is out of Utica. And the territory is pretty much like the center of New York, Utica, up to the Canadian border. So I worked there for about 6 months, and that's when I got laid off and started traveling. And then I ended up kind of settling in Vermont with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. And I decided to join the Pipe Fitters Union again to chase more money. And so the local here is Local 693. It's a mixed local. It's fairly small, but I had a really great experience there, and I really liked it. Being in the union, I am represented by a union now as well. I'm part of the IBEW Local 300, but working for a utility, it's not quite the same as being in like the pipe fitters union where there's different contractors and you go through the whole apprenticeship. What I do now is just I'm represented by a union and they help us with our negotiations for our money, but there's no like training. We don't have a pension through them. It's a lot less involved than it used to be with the pipe fitters.
Okay. Yeah, so is it that all the utilities up in that area that it's just ran by the union?
Uh, I mean, I actually don't know why. The gas company that I work for now is just Vermont Gas is what it's called. I don't know why we're represented by the IBEW. I think that's something that came about like in the 60s or the 70s maybe. Personally, I think what I do, I mean, I'm an underground or we work on underground utilities, so I am a pipe welder, and it seems like we would be much better suited to be in the pipe fitters union. Um, but yeah, I'm not really sure how that works. But unions in Vermont are actually like there's not a big union presence at all. The pipe fitters union where I was before, they're only like maybe 35-40% of the market. It's mostly non-union up here.
Really? Yeah, I always thought like union was pretty heavy up there, especially Northeast.
It definitely is like New England area. For some reason, I haven't quite figured it out, but Vermonters, they don't like unions for some reason, or they don't kind of get into them. And I talked to some guys, working around, and they'll say, "Oh, I wouldn't be a part of the union." I'm like, "Well, why?" And they don't really have a good reason. They've just always been told that unions are bad. And I don't necessarily agree with everything the union does, but I think that you have a better chance of getting a decent wage and benefits and all that through the union. Definitely better training, that's for sure.
Yeah. That's like the biggest gripe about unions a lot of times is I was talking to a guy the other day and he was like, why would I want to, join a union and pay dues, just so I can have a job? And I was like, well, when I was in the union, that like my dues were $30.50 a month. And I
Right.
had access to go down and practice. I had access to training, whether it be safety, rigging, welding, whatever. If I needed a new welding cert, I didn't have to pay for it. I go down to the hall, take the test. It's an accredited testing facility. It's a privately accredited testing facility. I mean, it's still ran through the AWS, but it's internationally based. So I could go down there and I could test out, and add another cert to my belt for free. And I
Yep.
took advantage of that. When I got laid off a couple of times, like I think 2 times the whole time I was in, I went down to the hall and I practiced and I tested and got certified. So it was like I used my downtime of being laid off to go and improve my skill set. There's not too many other companies where you could actually do that. If you get laid off from a regular job, like you're not allowed back at work until we bring you back on, if that ever happens. But for
Right.
$30.50 a month, I've get access to free training. Plus you got a pension, you got an annuity. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to it, but I could see the other side of that coin. I don't want somebody negotiating my wages on my behalf. Okay, yeah, that's a fair point. Um, and it's not for everybody. I mean, there's great things about the union. There's bad things about union. There's good things about private industry. There's bad things about private industry. So you just got to go with, kind of whatever meets your goals, whatever's going to align with your goals, what you want to do in life.
Right. And to the union dues thing, I think it's funny. Like the guys are like, oh, I'm not going to pay dues, and it's like, dude, you spend that much money on beer and cigarettes every week.
Yeah.
Like, why is $30 a month a big deal? And that's pretty much what our dues were up here in the pipe fitters. And you're definitely right about, being able to go to the hall. Like one thing that I really like, a skill that I think is super awesome that I was able to get through my time with the pipe fitters was orbital welding. And like when I went through school, we had a guy come in and do like a demo of orbital welding. But aside from that, I didn't know anything about it. And we have a small, like a nano or microchip factory here, chip fab in Vermont. And they were kind of ramping up and everybody kind of knew there was going to be work. So the hall had a class that we could take. And I was an apprentice at the time, and it was like during the summer. So it wasn't part of the normal classes, but it's still like I took the class for free from an old timer who knew all the ins and outs, all the tricks. He taught us how to write the programs. We had to take the test, like you weld up coupons. They get sent out for X-ray. So I was certified. It was all free, and it was like an extra class that went towards my apprenticeship. So, I mean, it sped up the process for me to get through with the apprenticeship, and I learned something totally new and awesome for free.
Yeah. Now, when you did orbital TIG welding, did you do that out in industry as well, or did you just do the classes and get certified?
So I was lucky enough to go and do that in the chip plant that we have here. I took the class, took the test, got the cert, and then I had to take another test or a couple tests that in the factory itself, they have their own set of tests that you have to take. Mostly what I was doing was small stainless tubing. So it was like 1/2 inch and 3/4, I think, that I tested on. And then later on, I think I had to take a test on 1 inch. But they pretty much just want to see that you know how to write the programs, how to operate the machine. And through the UA, the coupons would get sent out and x-rayed. But at the chip plant, they would have someone cut the coupons open and kind of like splay it open. And then they would kind of look in there and make sure that, you don't have any problems with the weld and everything looks consistent and good. So yeah, I did the testing, and then I got kind of linked up with this old timer. And he had been working in that plant through the pipe fitters for 25 years, 30 years. So I learned a lot of knowledge from him, a lot of tube bending, which I had no idea how to do. I'm still not very good at it. But I was able to do like a lot of position welds and kind of, climb around on the ceiling, and I learned a lot, actually. It was really cool skill. And like you were saying, it's not something that the non-union guys around here know how to do because they don't have a training facility. It's a pretty specialized skill, and it's really cool, actually.
Yeah, that's one area that I've never, like, I went up to, I brought my students up to Lincoln one year back. It was like 2016. We got to go up there for a week. And I think that was the first time I actually got to see orbital TIG welding in person. And it was just a demo. Like the program was already written, the machine was already hooked up. So it wasn't like a step-by-step class. It was more of a demonstration. And that stuff is freaking cool, man. And like I've never had the opportunity to do it out in industry or actually take an in-depth class and learn how to do it. So it's a very neat looking process when you get into it, and everybody's like, "Oh, that's not welding." Yeah, it is welding, because you're legitimately fusing the material together. You're using a shielding gas, a TIG torch. There's wire feed, that goes in, or there's a wire that's fed into the puddle. It's legit welding, and you actually have to be a better welder and know more about welding, because you got to program the damn thing. You don't just clamp it on the pipe and hit the green button and it just makes a perfect weld for you. So what all?
Yeah.
Walk me through the setup, because like I said, I'm curious. I've never had the opportunity to mess with it.
So all the machines that we were using were pretty old, like from the 90s, but they still work really well. Everything that I did was just autogenous welding, so it's just like butt fusion.
Okay.
And So, I mean, a lot of it is just lining up the pipe, making sure that it's aligned correctly. Setting up the machine is like 90% of orbital welding. And you're definitely right about, being a better welder or just having welding experience. It definitely helped me a lot because kind of towards the end of my time working in that chip plant, they had me trying to teach other guys how to do it, and they were not welders. And it it was difficult because you know usually like I had to write a few programs to kind of show that I knew the concept, but most of the time like your program is in the machine. And like the old timer that I worked with, he used the same program for years, and he would just say, all right, we're using 1/2 inch tubing today, and it's this program, and you just recycle the same thing basically. But there's a lot of troubleshooting involved. So, I mean, you have to get your pipes butted up perfectly, no high low. The machines have a little bit of adjustment, but not a lot. So if you're doing like prefab pipe or prefab tubing, you have to use like stands and different things to make sure that you get that pipe perfectly aligned, perfectly square. So that way, when you make that butt weld, you can't have hardly any high low at all. And yeah, it's a lot of setup, and just getting that weld head on there correctly and making sure like your tungsten is set up correctly. And then if you do have a problem, the troubleshooting is where that will make or break someone. Like if, I was able to get some inexperienced guys to set up the machine and make a few welds, but when the welds didn't come out correctly, I'm like, okay, why? Like, is your internal purge correct? Is your external, like the head purge, is that correct? Like there's so many different variables. It can drive you nuts actually trying to figure out what was wrong with it. And you figure out how much you know and how much you don't know when you have to start troubleshooting that stuff.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed the troubleshooting aspect of like messing around with any process, any machine. I think that's the fun part. I get to do some investigative work, and then you start learning how to dial in the machine better. What's all these different knobs and buttons and settings and all that stuff do? And once you understand that, you become a much better educated welder. And then I mean, not you kind of look like the hot shot when you walk over there and you're like, oh yeah, this is wrong. And you fix that and they're like, damn, he's smart. No, I've just made a lot of mistakes and learned from them along the way.
Yep. Yeah. I've learned a lot of lessons the hard way. And it's funny you say that. You look like the hot shot. Because I worked on a job for a short period of time on the Portsmouth Naval Base. It was a really cool nuclear submarine project that we were working on. And like, first day I get there, I'm new, I don't know anybody. And the foreman was like, you know anything about flux core welding? And I'm like, I mean, I know a little bit. I worked in a fab shop. I did some dual shield stuff. So I'm like, yeah, I think I can figure it out. And they're like, all right, go up on the top of this tower, and there's this kid up there, and he's trying to run this flux core box. I don't think he's done anything at all today, and try to help him. So I go up there, and the kid's like fresh out of school. He was trying, but he he had the machine set up correctly and the suitcase set up correctly for flux core, but he had the voltage way down. And I went to run a little bit. It was actually overhead, and it's just spurting, and it's like not giving me what I want. I'm like, dude, you just got to crank this thing up. And I just went down to the machine and just cranked it and started welding. And I felt bad because I just took over for that kid and kind of pushed him aside and started working. And after that, everyone's like, oh, wow, you know what you're doing. And, they treated me really well after that. And it was kind of like, I really didn't know that much, but I'm like, just crank that thing and see what happens.
Knew enough to get by.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah, flux core
Yeah.
flux core could be a fickle beast. I mean, like usually 26, 27 volts, and that's usually where a lot of people that hate flux core, they don't know how to set the machine up correctly. They're running on the wrong polarity.
Yep.
They're trying to use gas with self shielded, or they're trying to run gas shielded by self shielded because they think both wires you can just add gas or not. You just but it's if the wire's specified to be ran with gas, usually you're going to run it on DC positive and you're going to run gas with it. If it's spec'd out for, self shielded, don't try to add any shielding gas. It's not going to make it run better.
Yeah, yeah. That job after that, there was a lot of like really intricate welding and like specialty stuff that I didn't know, and they were asking me about the flux core wires and can we use this one in this spot, and I'm like, I can turn the machine on and run it, but I'm not gonna tell you which wires to use in what situation. And I'm like, that's over my head. Like, there's a lot to learn there, and I really don't know all that much about like the flux core, wire classifications and that stuff.
And that flux, the classification on flux core is just so damn confusing. And I mean, there's like a half-ass chart available, but there's not one because you get like the little designators, and it's hard to find one of the cheat sheets or what does all these different designators actually mean. I like going off of like the Lincoln C 1.10 manual. That book is a freaking godsend, and you look at it, and it's just all the different filler metals they make. ESOB has one too. It's just a filler metal spec book. So whatever application you're working on, you flip over to that, you're like, okay, I'm working, I needed to use a flux core wire. You go to the flux core section and say, oh, okay, this wire, let's say we're welding up some 1/2 inch thick material. Okay, this one max material thickness is 5/16. Like a lot of your E71 T11s, I think they're limited to 5/16 and less. They're designed for sheet metal. So that's not something you want to use on a structural application. So you switch over to a different wire. I think their NR 211 is for 5/16 and below, and 212 will get you up to 3/4 of an inch. And I've had companies calling me and they're like, hey man, we're running these tests. We're trying to get our guys started, and we're everything's set up correctly. This is the wire that we're using and we're welding with it. And I was like, oh, well, that's your problem. You're going to keep failing because that wire isn't meant for that thick of material. It'll run on there and it looks good. You'll put a nice looking weld down, but when you go to bend it, the mechanical properties just aren't there. You're getting too much, like weld metal dilution in there. You're not tying enough into the base metal. So you got to switch your wire. You'll be able to cert your guys no problem.
Yeah. When I took my CWI exam, I remember like they had questions about the classifications for the flux core wire and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew enough to like look at how long it was. And I'm like, okay, that's definitely a flux core wire. I don't know what every little piece means for that, but I can tell it's flux core. And I knew just enough to like skate by on that part of the exam.
Yeah, there was one point that they went from like a 5-digit numbering system to like 13 or 15 digits. And they tried that for a couple of years, and it was just so damn confusing. They switched back to like a 5 to 6 digit classification.
Yeah, that's a lot. I can deal with stick welding 7018.
Yeah. That's an easy one. I like that one. MIG wire is really good. Those make sense. But then you get into all your stainlesses and aluminums and stuff like that, and it's like, oh, those numbers are kind of arbitrary. That's like the alloy. That has nothing to do with the tensile strength, the position, or any of that stuff. That's the alloy that you got to match the filler metal to the base metal with that.
Yeah, there's so much of that stuff that's over my head, like metallurgy and things like that. And I really like that side of like the welding career and aspect of it. But I don't know if I'm smart enough to grasp onto some of that stuff.
Yeah, I've got access to the AWS metallurgy. There's metallurgy 1 and metallurgy 2. And it's something I really want to do. I've just not had time to sit down and kind of go through that online course. So I think I've got like a month or two left on it. And I need to get on there and start, learning that stuff, because that's an area that I'm really not strong in when it comes to the welding industry is metallurgy. Max with the Canadian Welding Bureau, he's really big into metallurgy. Like he knows the shit when it comes to it. That's one area that I'm not too good with yet. That's an area that I need to study.
Yeah. I've worked most of my career in construction industry. So it's like you're welding black iron, you're welding stainless. I remember I saw a kid weld like a stainless flange to a black iron piece of pipe. And that was like the extent of my craziness with metallurgy. I really haven't gotten to like copper, nickel and all that stuff. I think that stuff's really cool and I'd love to learn it. But up here in Vermont, it's kind of like, it's pretty crude as far as like the things that we do. There's not a lot of like specialty metals or anything like that.
Yeah, it's pretty much,
unfortunately.
Yeah, pretty much my whole career has always been steel, stainless, and aluminum. Just like basic, A36 mild steel, mostly 308 stainless, a little bit of 316, and then mostly 6061 T6 aluminum. Other than that, I really haven't had a chance to kind of branch out and weld different materials.
Yeah, I know like a lot of like copper nickel and stuff like that. They do a lot of that in like oil refineries and like nuclear power plants and stuff. I'd love to try to get into those industries, but in Vermont, like we just don't have that stuff here. It's kind of, we're kind of in the Stone Ages up here.
Kind of limited.
Yeah, a little bit.
Now, so are you out there making repairs every day, or are you installing new, or what's your primary
So like
gig?
my current job right now, most of what I'm doing is in-service welding on the gas lines here. We have like a really small gas pipeline gas system compared to most states. And we're not really putting in much new pipe at all. Vermont's like very liberal, and people don't want natural gas. They think it's super bad for the environment or whatever. I don't really know. So we do put a little bit of new pipe in the ground, but more often than not, the new pipe is plastic, the polyethylene, I think. And I'm learning more about the plastic stuff. That's kind of like it comes along with my job, as I have to also be a gas technician, like fusing plastic pipe and like understanding the whole system. But for now, most of what I do is just in service repair welding. So we had a welder with the company right before I got hired who kind of like snuck his way in. He wasn't an experienced pipe welder. He welded for a whole summer and there was no inspection or anything. And they started kind of going back and looking at his work at the end of the summer and realizing like, oh man, this guy didn't really know what he was doing. And then so they got rid of that guy, and now I've been going back and cutting out his old welds and basically just redoing his work from last summer.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's kind of been it's a big learning experience for me because like when you weld on the main for the gas line, you make one little weld for a punch a T, right? In order for me to cut that weld out and repair it without shutting off gas services to anybody's house, I have to do like a whole day's worth of welding to fix like 1 hour's worth of his weld. So I've gotten a lot of experience, or not a ton, but I've gotten quite a bit pretty quickly. Um, if we do put new gas pipe in steel, it's usually like we're moving our existing gas mains for other contractors. So like right now there's tons and tons of like road work and other utility construction. So they're putting in like, for example, in Burlington, they're putting in like new sewer main, new stormwater, and new water mains all through the city. And our gas lines from like the 70s are in the way all the time. So we'll have to go in and move a bunch of that stuff for them. So I've done a little bit of new pipe, but it's mostly just in service stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Weld repairs like that, that's going to end up making you a damn good welder. Going back through and having to cut things out and redo them and stuff like that. That really, that teaches you a lot in a short amount of time.
Yeah, it definitely has. There's some things where it's like, I'll look at the weld from the previous welder and I'm like, that's not that bad. I'll just, repair the little bit of undercut and it'd be fine. I wish that they would let me do that, but there's not really like a safe way to kind of grind down that existing weld and repair it properly while it's in service. Because you're just taking too much of a risk of causing a huge leak. And once you have blowing gas, I mean, you can't really just weld over it like you would, you know what I mean? Like it creates too much of a hazard. So we have to weld stoppers on, which is like a fitting that allows you to drill through the pipe and isolate and stop the gas. And then you can blow the gas down either by putting a punch a T on or blowing it down through a service and then cutting out the old weld. So it's a pretty big process to fix a small weld, and sometimes they're not that bad. Like I've seen some of the guys work, and it's like, there's a little undercut there, but I mean, I don't think it needs to be cut out. But that's not really my, I don't work as like a CWI for the company. I have my CWI, but I'm just a welder, so I do what I'm told.
Right. Now, how do you turn the gas off? You said like as you're making that repair, you put a plug on either side of it?
Basically, yeah. So you weld these stopper fittings on either side of the bad weld, and that allows. So you weld the fitting onto the pipe, right? It's like a a sleeve basically that goes around the pipe, and it has a longitudinal seam on both sides and then a circumferential weld around the pipe. And on the top, it has threads, right? And you put a ball valve on there. And then on top of the ball valve, you have like a drill rig.
So it's kind of
And
like
it's
hot tapping.
all exactly
Okay.
just like you would do for like a water line. It's all self-contained. So you're able to open that valve, drill down through, pull the drill back up, close the valve, and then you can put, we have like, it's called a stopper. So it's kind of like this rubber, it's like a fitting kind of that goes down into the pipe, a little bit bigger than the drill bit diameter, and you squeeze it down and it'll expand, and you can stop the gas basically to isolate a certain area. And there, that doing a hot tap or putting these stoppers on, I just do the welding part of it, and I work with a whole crew that they run the stoppers, and that's like a whole trade within itself. Those guys know a ton about the gas system and how it works, and you have like zero margin for error. If you make a little mistake, you could potentially have to shut down, gas service to someone's house, to hundreds of houses or businesses, or, you can cause big problems by making like a mindless, a silly little mistake.
Dang. And are
Yeah,
you stick welding these on, or are you TIG welding?
it's all stick welding. Yeah, this stuff, it's only Schedule 40 pipe. A lot of what I do is 2-inch or 1.25 inch. So it's relatively small. I'm just, I stick weld all of that on there. All of our in-service stuff is just 7018. And that's what I did majority of my career. So like in the pipe fitters, that's pretty much all we did: 6010 root, 7018 out. And it was in the in-service stuff, it's all uphill too. The new pipe, like if I do put in new gas main, it's all like 6010 downhand, and I'm not great at that yet. That's been a big change for me, switching to downhill welding. So it's kind of been good for me that I'm doing majority in service, and it's uphill welding where I can, feel comfortable, and it looks decent. You know what I mean? Because there's guys, since we had that last welder who had problems, the guys kind of that I work with, they like to pick apart my work and point out. I mean, any little thing they like to point it out.
Can they weld any better?
They couldn't weld at all to
Exactly.
save their lives.
Exactly. It's usually the ones give you the most crap is the ones that can't do it themselves.
Yeah, but I get irritated. I was getting irritated at first about, that simple fact. Like, dude, you can't weld. Why are you telling me that I got undercut on there? I'm like, if I gave you a VWAT gauge, you wouldn't even know how to measure the undercut, right? So like, why are you giving me a hard time? But now I've kind of changed my mindset to be like, okay, well, I'm not going to leave anything behind for them to pick apart, right? So it's just going to make me a better welder. It's just going to make it to where, like, even if I do have a 64th of undercut, I'm not going to leave it. I'm going to fix it or blend it in, or, you know what I mean? It's going to make me better in the long run.
Oh yeah, no, for sure. That's pretty slick. So I'm guessing it's not really high pressure lines that you're dealing with if they're going to be running downhand.
Yeah. So what I don't work on our transmission side. That's like the pipeline side of it. We do have transmission line, and they bring in contractors to weld on that stuff, and that's higher pressure. I don't know actually off the top of my head what the pressure is for that. I work on the distribution side of things, so like just the pipes in the street going to your house type of thing. And that's usually anywhere from like 75 to 90 pounds of pressure. It depends on like the temperature outside and the time of the year, stuff like that. So it's not super high pressure, and it's really not any different than what I did in the pipe fitters. Because I welded on quite a bit of steam. I did some high pressure steam. I did a lot of high temp hot water and a lot of chilled water. So, we did a lot of wet taps. So it's really, I don't know. To me, a pipe is a pipe, and it doesn't really matter what's on the inside. I mean, it does, but I'm not worried. A lot of people are like, oh, doesn't that make you nervous welding on live gas lines? And I'm like, nah, not really. Like, I know I'm not going to burn through it.
Yeah, as long as the gas stays on the inside, you're in good shape.
Yeah. And, natural gas, I mean, it doesn't burn when it's 100% gas. It's got to be mixed with oxygen and everything else. I think it's like 5 to 15% is flammable. Anything above that flammable limit, it's not going to explode in your face.
Really? I
So,
didn't know that.
yeah, it
I know
has
obviously it's got to
there's
be
a
mixed with oxygen in order for it to combust, but
right. There's a limit there. I'm pretty sure off the top of my head it's I don't know. Someone will probably correct me. But yeah, 5 to 15% I think is where it's flammable. But like I said, there's so much to the natural gas industry that I don't know yet. I'm learning new stuff constantly at work. And it's pretty cool that, I've been out working in the field almost 10 years now, and like I'm still the new guy. You know what I mean? Like I'm still picking up new stuff every day. So,
all right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick commercial break. This segment of the Arc Junkies podcast is brought to you by Everlast Welders. Are you looking to pick up your first machine? Maybe you're ready to upgrade from your machine you bought at the local big box store, or maybe you need a machine or a few machines for your small business. Well, check out Everlast Welders. They have a machine for every skill level, budget, and process you need to handle, even true multi-process machines like the Lightning MTS series. Check out the full list of power sources at everlastwelders.com and see which machine is right for you. And as always, if you buy any machine that comes with a stock foot pedal, get that free Nova foot pedal and TIG torch upgrade when you type in Arc Junkies in the comments section at checkout. Everlast Welders. Weld mean, weld green. Now let's get back to the show. I mean, that's you got to do that. I mean, if you're going out there every day and you're not learning something new, I mean, you're doing something wrong.
yeah. I mean, unfortunately, I have to learn a lot of lessons the hard way at this job, because I don't have, like, I'm the only welder for the company right now. I'm the welder. So I don't have someone to ask, like, hey, what would you do in this situation? Or how would you weld this fitting? Like a few weeks ago, I had to weld on a pumpkin over a leaking 2-inch valve. So it's like a clamshell that goes around the valve and it just encapsulates the whole thing. And I'd never welded one before. And the foreman's like, I don't know what to do. I mean, we know what to do. You have to weld it on there. But like, I don't have someone to tell me, like, all right, be careful in this section. There's a weird, like the pumpkin that we were using, the part that goes around the pipe is 2-inch, but the center of it that goes over the valve, it blows up to like 6-inch. And there's a really weird beveled section with a corner, and part of the pumpkin was up against the bank, so you have a hard spot where I'm only using 3 inches of my rod maybe, and you have to weld through this corner section. I'd never done anything like that, and you can't like break your arc if you get a big slag puddle or something in there. You couldn't even get a grinder in there to grind it. This was the first time that I was using like a chipping hammer to clean the slag and a wire brush, um, in a long time, like since I'm doing structural welding. So there was another time where it's like there's no room for error, and I'm like, I don't have anybody to ask. I'm just gonna hope for the best, I guess.
Yeah, you should get one of those the wire brushes that you put on a drill.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I think Ferd makes some
Yeah.
of those. It kind of looks like a piece of steel cable. They're about
Yeah.
1/4 inch in diameter, but man, those things work great for getting into tight spots and corners and stuff like that. You can put them on like an extension on a drill and get real tight areas.
Yeah, I'll have to put it on my list. I got a list, I mean, long, of all the different things that I need for this
All
job.
the new tools that you
Um,
don't have that you need to
yeah,
go out and get.
yeah, exactly. The company, they gave me a company truck, and it's got a million toolboxes, but they're all pretty much empty. And I don't know what it's supposed, I got basic stuff, but I don't have like a lot of specialty tools. But one thing I will say about working for a utility is it's a lot different than working for a contractor, in the sense that like they make millions of dollars every year, right? And they're not necessarily making that money off my back. I'm repairing the stuff, but like when those gas meters are running, they're making money.
Mhm.
So any tools that I want, safety gear, uniform, like all that stuff, they take care of you really well.
Oh, that's a plus.
Yeah, I had no idea that working for a utility was even an option. I've just worked for contractors for so long. And then I saw the job ad on Indeed, and it paid more than what I was making. So I was like, all right, I'm going to go there. And, I get into the utility world and I realize like, wow, they really take care of you. The dollar per hour is a little bit more, but I mean, awesome paid time off, uniforms, boot allowances, They really take care of you, which is pretty nice.
That's something that a lot of people don't think about, is when they take a job, they're just looking at the dollar figure, but you gotta kind of add up like the fringe benefits and stuff like that. Cause I worked for a company, they paid relatively well. But the bonus was I didn't put gas in my tank for the 5
Yep.
years that I worked for them. So, like, even on the weekends,
Yeah.
they're like, "Hey, just, if you need gas for your truck, just company card." And then when I left, I was like, "Oh, shit." Like, I'm making a little bit more money, but now I gotta pay for my gas, so it's almost a wash.
Yeah, I mean that's thousands of dollars a year between, like if the gas card alone is a huge plus, but if you have a company truck, I mean that's tires, brakes, oil changes. That's a huge savings.
Yeah.
And like I have a company truck now. I don't take it home on the weekends, and I don't want to like be on their radar as someone who like abuses the things that they're allowing me to use. So I don't use the company truck. Like a lot of times I will leave it at the shop and take my own rig home if I'm going to go get my hair cut or go if I have stops to make along the way. But it definitely is a huge savings. And the little things matter. Like when the company does those little things to take care of you, like it makes a big difference.
Yep. I would
I
tell
think so.
students when they're getting ready to graduate, they're like, "Oh, yeah, this company over here, they're gonna start off at $20 an hour, and this one over here, they're only gonna start off at 18." Okay, well, what other things is that company that's gonna pay you 18 offering? Well, they got a boot allowance, they got a hood allowance, they got a tool allowance. After 90 days, you get this, that, and the other thing. Well, what's that company at $20 offering you? That's $20 an hour.
Right.
Okay. So the only benefit you're getting out of that is a paycheck. You got to, and when you're young, especially getting out of welding school, that's the only thing you're thinking about is that dollar sign. And it's like,
Yep.
well, do you have to bring all your own tools in? Like, what's the requirement? Because I've seen some companies are like, oh yeah, $18 an hour, but you got to have your own truck, you got to have your own welding machine, your own safety equipment, your own tools, and it's like, what the hell? At that point, you're a subcontractor getting paid shitty wages, you know.
Right.
So like,
Right.
weigh those options out before you just sign on the dotted line for an extra $2 an hour when that's the only benefit you're getting.
Yeah, you're definitely right. Like when I came out of welding school, I didn't think about all that stuff. But you're out on the job and you're buying all your own clothes, and then you look around and you see the guys with the company hoodies on and the company hat and all that stuff, and you're like, man, that's pretty cool. I want that stuff. One thing I thought was really cool, the company that I'm with now, this utility. When I first started, I was only there for like maybe a month or two, and I got called for jury duty, which I had never had that happen. I didn't know what to expect. And I told my boss about it, and they're like, oh, yeah, just put it on your timesheet and we'll pay you for that. I'm like, what? Yeah, they paid my full wages. I went for one day. I didn't get selected. So it wasn't like I was there for a month-long trial. But I think even if I was there for that long, they would have paid my wages the whole time, which is pretty cool.
Oh, that's nice. I don't know any other companies that would do that because, like, you go down for jury duty, I think they give you like $25 and a turkey sandwich.
Right. Yeah, so it's been a big change. Like the last contractor that I worked there for 3 years. I was one of the key employees. Like for a lot of the 3 years, I was the only welder. There were other people that came and went, but I was like steady employee. And they gave me one shirt in 3 years. Like that's all that I got. So to go to a utility where they give me all the uniform, like they give us pretty good allowance for uniforms, and then they have like a laundry service, so I don't even have to wash my own clothes at home. So it's a big change.
Oh, that's definitely nice.
Yeah.
Especially because work clothes add up, and what sucks is if you're not a subcontractor, you don't get to write any of that stuff off.
Yeah.
So you got to buy
And
your own
I'm
boots
like,
and pants and shirts and all that shit, and then at the end of the year, you're like, "Can I write this off?" Well, no, you don't own your own business. You need to have at least $10,000 to be able to qualify to start writing things off. Well, damn, that sucks. So I'm just at a loss. I'm paying to go to work. So you're paying
right.
gas, you're paying tolls, you're paying the vehicle maintenance, you're buying all your uniforms, your safety equipment, and none of it's a write off.
Yeah. And I'm like, I can't help myself. I keep like, even though I get uniforms, like I still want to have the cool new like up and smoke welding hoodie, and like I am kind of a sucker for like the cool welding caps and all that stuff. Yeah, even though I get the uniforms, I'm still like spending my own money a little bit.
Well, I mean, like the up and smoke jackets they're definitely worth the price. I mean, as far as durability and protection, like Mac is a solid dude, and he came out with a badass product, and it's worth it,
Yeah.
especially if you're in like a cold area. Like I bought that hoodie when it came out, and because I'm a sucker too. I was like, oh, badass welding jacket, thick, heavy duty. Yeah, I like that. I've probably welded with. It's gonna last me my entire life because I've probably only
Right.
welded with it 15, 20 times because it doesn't get that cold here in Florida. But I mean, it's a badass hoodie, and it's thick too. Nothing's getting in there. I usually when I was at the school, I'd take the students out, and flux core always fell right around like fall winter time frame. So we do a lot of
Yep.
flux core self shielded outside with the NR233. We'd run the engine drive and all that stuff, and I'm out there warm, dude, doing overhead 233, and all that stuff's falling on you, and didn't get burnt once.
Yeah, running flux core like that, it's a good way to ruin your
Oh
clothes.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So because you
Yeah, I
have
bought.
go ahead.
Oh, no. Go
No, I
ahead.
was gonna say because you have your CWI already. Are you out there? Do you find yourself like pre-inspecting all of your welds before the inspector comes out to like do their job?
Big
Because
time.
you already have all the tools and shit, right?
Yeah. When you take the exam, they give you that cool little toolkit.
Mm-hmm.
But that's actually always been like a strategy of mine throughout my whole career. Is like, and I think someone told me this when I first started, like whatever tools the inspector is going to use to inspect your welds, you should have those tools and you should be inspecting your work before he even gets there.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm doing now, like I don't have an inspector all the time, like looking over my shoulder, but I do have the guys that I work with. And because I'm the new guy and the last welder had problems, they're pretty critical of my work. So I do spend a lot of time, um, like I I'm really comfortable welding pipe. Like I don't worry about leaks because I know that I do things correctly. But I'll spend more time trying to make my weld appearance look like perfect than I do just to complete the weld. You know what I mean? Like I'll redo my cap or I'll add an extra pass or I'll grind, even if something is like, I know it's not porosity, but it's just a crease in the weld. It's just a spot where the light doesn't look good. And I'll spend a lot of time just fixing that stuff because, once I get out of the hole and the gas techs get down in the hole and now they're doing the stopping and they're doing all of their work, they're right there looking at my welds. And if I have, I mean, there's a few guys that really like to give me a hard time. So I mean, if I have the littlest bit of undercut, they're gonna say something. So I definitely spend a lot of time, making sure that everything looks good. But unfortunately, that's kind of like the extent of me using my CWI. Like I've had it for about a year now, and I haven't really done a ton with it.
That's always a good practice as a welder. Like I did the same thing. It wasn't till so when I was non-union, a lot of times I would weld. The inspector comes out. I'd take him around all the different welds because it was most of the stuff that I had to access was working out of a man lift. So I'd take the
Yep.
inspector up there, check everything out, and they always just looked at it. Okay, yeah, it's a good looking weld, or you need to put something else on here. They always just looked at it. But then when I joined the Ironworkers Union and I was sent out to the theme parks, all the inspectors like they had their tools with them. They had a flashlight. They had the VWAC gauge, bridge cam gauge, fillet weld gauges, and they would actually take the time and go through and measure everything. And so that was the first time throughout my career that I was getting dinged on welds. They're like, "Hey, this weld over here, it's too big. Cut that out and redo it. This one over here is too small. Add a couple extra passes." And like the inspectors that I worked with, they were cool. They would actually give you feedback. They didn't just say,
Yep.
this weld fails. They'd be like, this weld fails, and here's why. Because they had some background in welding. So I did the same thing,
Yep.
man. I went on Amazon. I bought a set of fillet weld gauges and a VWAC gauge, and I didn't learn about bridge cam till way later on. Or I didn't buy a bridge cam till later on because it's like a $90 tool. So I kept it pretty cheap, but I'd go through and inspect my own work prior to the inspector getting out there. Not that I was going to, like argue back and be like, no, I already measured it. It's good. You're wrong. Not because of that, because I wanted to make sure my work was good so that the next time the inspector came out, he wasn't dinging me on anything. That was my goal. It was
Right.
like, I don't want any rejects. And so,
Yep.
but I mean, every welder, you know, if you're in the business of making welds, you should have at least a fillet weld gauge, maybe a weld reinforcement gauge, and a VWAC. You know, and learn how
Yeah.
to use those efficiently. Learn how to use them effectively. You're going to be a much better
Yeah.
welder.
Absolutely. And yeah, just trying to do everything you can to keep the inspector happy. I don't know how many guys I've worked with who are like, "Oh, that inspector, he's a dick," blah, and they like just run them down. And I'm like, "Yeah, no wonder you keep failing all your
Yeah.
welds. Maybe like talk to the inspector like he's a human being and ask his name and shake his hand, and you probably do all right."
Well, some inspectors are assholes. They're out there, you know, they get their license, they got their wallet card and all, you know, now they think they're the law and they just go out there and they're like, "Nope, failed, fix it." What do I fix? I don't care. Just, you know, what's wrong with it? It's not right. Fix it. I'll be back. Call me when you're ready. Oh, okay. So you get guys like that, but I always, you know, like I do a lot of testing, so I always try to give feedback how to make, you know, somebody better, you know, whatever the discontinuity is, like, okay, you need to practice this. I always try to give feedback because the inspectors that I, you know, that were always in looking at my stuff, they always gave me some sort of feedback. So, you know,
Yeah.
like you try to
Yeah.
pass that on, but I mean, some inspectors are just pricks. Most of them, you know, a
Yeah.
lot of those are the ones that have never welded before. So
Yes.
they
That's
can't
a
tell you how to fix it.
whole Right. That's a whole nother thing. That's kind of been the case in my career quite a bit. I mean, I've had a few guys who like that I worked with closely who came up, they got their CWI and they're still working as welders or whatever. But I've ran into a few guys. I remember in particular on one job, I was uh, doing some structural steel down in Massachusetts. Um, and we had the inspector come, and the welding cert that I had at the time, I had to have it signed like a continuity
Yep.
log. I would have it signed every 6 months by a CWI. So, you know, my welds were fine. I didn't have a problem there, but I went up to him after he kind of came down out of the man lift, and I was like, "Hey, you know, my name's Jesse. I got this weld cert and I was hoping you could sign it for me to keep up my continuity." And he like gave me a bunch of pushback, and he was like, "You know, I should be charging you for this. And, you know, guys ask me for this all the time. And, you know, you're taking time out of my day." And he was like a serious dick. And I was like, he did end up signing it for me, which is nice, but he like gave me a whole spiel about how like I should pay him for his signature. And I'm like, "All right, dude, calm
Jeez.
down."
The only
And you could,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say, you could tell that the guy had never welded. And I'll never forget this. He had a notebook, right? Writing stuff down. Okay. But then he had a holster for his notebook. And like when I saw he had like a hip holster for the notebook
That's how you know
in
he's
the
going to be
man
a dick.
basket, I'm like, all right, this guy is going to be a nightmare. And I've never seen that since. I don't know what that. I forget the guy's name, but yeah, the hip holster.
Got a holster for his
that was new.
notepad. Dork.
Yeah, yeah,
I have charged for doing continuity maintenance only if I have to go out of my way to do it. So there's actually a
yep,
couple companies and they hire me to come out there and witness their welders and then sign off. And like, there's a whole form I got to fill out. It's not as simple as, you know, like checking the box and then stamp it. Like I know the one for,
yeah,
when I was with the Hall, every 6 months, I had to do the same thing, had a continuity log book for every process, every position that I was certified to do. And I would always, while I was in, you know, out there in the field, I was like, "Oh, I know the inspector is going to be there today, so I'm going to bring my continuity book with me." They'd sign it, stamp it, whatever, not a big deal. And that's the same thing that I do. Like if somebody pops by the school and they're like, "Hey, you know, can you sign off on my continuity book?" Yeah, okay, let me go ahead and run a pass. Let me make sure you know what you're still doing and all that stuff. And in the position with the process, yeah, okay, you're good. Stamp it, sign it, not a big deal. But if I have to go out of my way to do it, like travel to somebody, then I'm charging for that.
right. Yeah, that's understandable.
But if I'm right there, I'm not going to charge somebody and be like, "Hey, you know, give me $50 and I'll stamp it for you."
Yeah, that was like his thing, and he was on the job. He was there, like somebody was paying him to go
Yeah, just
there. You know,
fucking sign the damn thing.
Yeah, it was funny.
Damn. So do you have any intentions of like branching out and doing any sort of inspection work, whether it's like threshold inspections or procedure development or anything like that?
I really want to try. I don't know if I'm gonna like it. I definitely want to try though to use my CWI. And I've thought about getting more API certifications. I just don't know exactly what I want to do with it. Like, do I want to try to stay in the oil and gas and be like a pipeline inspector? Do I want to try to do my own thing? I just feel like there's so much that I don't know yet to try to go out on my own. And unfortunately, in Vermont, there's not a lot of welding inspection that goes on like at all. There's really only one inspection company that I know of. And I already know the guy's not going to pay me what I want. So it's kind of one of those things where, like, do I leave welding entirely and just like take a year and go work for a non-destructive testing company and get as much experience as I can and see if I like it? Or it's a hard call to make, especially because there's not a lot of it here. So I would kind of have to like travel, or yeah, it's something I'm interested in doing, but unfortunately right now I'm kind of stuck kind of where I am.
I got you. And that's kind of a hard decision to make. 'Cause I mean, if you're making good money now, you may not make good money entry level testing.
Yeah. Yeah. So the job that I have now with the gas company, it's also, I don't think it's something that I want to do forever, but I keep telling myself that I'm going to stick it out there for 5 years and learn as much as I can and get more into the gas side of things. So that way, if I do decide to break out on my own, whether it's an inspection or rig welding, I'll have a lot more knowledge than just like, oh, I was there for 6 months. You know what I mean? So I got some time to try to figure out what it is that I want to do. It's kind of funny. Like, I've listened to quite a few of your episodes, and a lot of the guys, it seems like they got into something and then they stick with it, and that's what they're doing. Like I really like that episode where you had the weld zombie guy on there,
Yeah.
and he was talking all about the fab shop that he worked in, and that was really cool. But for me, like, I've never been able to just work in one place for a long time. I like to bounce around and do different things. So I still don't know what I really want to do with the rest of my career. Like, I'm 33, I got 30 years to go, and I still don't know where I really want to end up, or what I really want to do. I'm still trying to figure it out, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, that's the great thing about welding, though, is because if you don't like what you're doing or you want to go out and do something more, there's always more opportunities or different avenues to get into. Like, case in point, you started off doing structural steel or working in a fab shop. You're like, okay, this is cool. And then you got into structural steel ironwork. Oh, that was cool. You learned some more shit. And then got into pipe welding, with the pipe fitters and all that, learning pipe fitting, learning welding, learning more welding techniques. And now you're doing natural gas stuff. So, I mean, that's the great thing is you can hop around from one industry to the next and you just carry that skill set over. A lot of these skills that we learn as welders, they're transferable into, a completely different industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's like unlimited learning potential. That's probably been like my favorite part about working in the construction industry is all the other stuff that I've gotten to learn. Like now with working for an underground utility, like we use excavators all like every day. And I'm not operating the excavator next to the gas line or nothing, but we have excavators at our shop, and I just get to, downtime, I'll go hop in one and dig around in the shop in the back where we have a big spoil pile where we just throw, like chunks of concrete and stuff that we get rid of eventually. So it's like you get to pick up all these other things. Like when I was in the pipe fitters union, we're a mixed local. So we were plumbers and pipe fitters. So if there was no welding work for a few weeks, I would just jump in with the plumbers. And now I'm doing soldering and brazing, and running PVC. And we did some residential stuff. I learned how to do PEX and all kinds of different things. So yeah, I mean, the learning potential is unlimited. There's still so much that I could do. I just haven't quite figured it out yet.
Don't know what you want to be when you grow up.
Yeah.
I've got the same problem.
Yeah. I actually, this morning, it's not really welding related, but I did a little bit of turkey hunting this morning, and I hunt on a farm, and the farmer, I helped him for a minute shearing a few sheep, which was really cool. And I'm like, boy, maybe I want to be a sheep farmer when I grow up. This is pretty cool.
I don't know. That would probably get old pretty quick.
I don't know, So when I kind of apprenticed under the blacksmith, it was like a part-time job that I did on Saturdays. And I think one of the coolest things that I liked about like the blacksmith trade, like, was the old timer that I worked with, his lifestyle, where he lived above his shop and he would get up in the mornings and just come down the stairs and he's just in his workshop and he'd start a fire, and it was like his whole little world was right there, and he made a whole career out of like working at his house. And he didn't, I mean, we would have to go, like, we would make handrails and stuff like that, and we would have to go install them, but for the most part, I mean, he just hung out at his house, and people came to him asking him for stuff to make stuff for him. And I don't know, it's pretty cool, I think, to just work right from home and make a good living like that.
Yeah, that's a pretty neat way to do that. One of the guys that I used to help out, so I met him. I was working for a company, and that's where I met him. But when I was with the ironworkers, like if I had free time or downtime or rain days or whatever, I'd go to his shop and help him out. And he literally,
Nice.
like, he had his house, and then right next door was his shop. I mean, I think there was probably maybe 10 foot between his house and the shop, and it was the same thing. Like, people would come to him to get stuff fixed and repaired. So it was really cool working in that shop because it was something different every day. And he did a lot
Yeah.
of handrails and gates, like custom ornamental type stuff. But also, like somebody would roll in with a pontoon boat. Those things suck to weld on. Um, so I learned what I learned about welding on pontoon boats is that I'll never weld on another pontoon boat. It's like welding toilet paper with matches. It sucks. At least this guy's did anyway, man. It was like paper thin, and he had it covered up with epoxy and all kinds of stuff. So I had to grind all that shit off, and then aircraft stripper, and but like I got to learn a lot just working with him. Somebody come in and weld up a trailer hitch for him, or they broke something, they need it repaired. So it was always cool because it was
Yep.
something different all the time. But yeah, I mean, he had a very similar situation where it was like the shop was literally right next door. He'd walk to it every morning, open it up about 8 o'clock, and then just kind of go to work. And when he was done, he'd close the door and walk inside.
Yeah, that's kind of like my, I don't know, I shouldn't say like retirement, but like later on, that's like a goal that I have, is to like I have a decent sized garage and just try to set up, so I can do stuff like that. And I've slowly been like chipping away, buying welding machines. I bought like a Miller Bobcat a few years ago. Recently I bought like a Miller Matic 225, I think, or 235. So I can do some MIG welding and TIG welding. So I'm just kind of slowly like collecting stuff. I really don't do much in my house yet, but I don't know, that's like a cool, kind of lifestyle, I think, to just kind of do like homesteading and blacksmithing. But you got to be really versatile and be able to do a bunch of different stuff if that's what you're going to do.
Oh yeah, that's my uncle. He does his hobby for the better part of his entire life has been farming, like old school
Yep.
farming. Like he uses everything is horse drawn. So I used to go up there in
Wow.
the summer, and like I said, it's a hobby. That like I'd go up there in the summer, and I would help him bale hay. Him and my cousins and I, we'd go out and bale hay. But I mean, he would go to the barn and he'd hook up to like this little cutter or whatever. It's like this eight
Yep.
foot blade that comes down the side, and it's powered by the wheels moving forward. And it would just cut the hay down, and then he'd come back and he'd link up. After that dried enough, he'd link up to another piece of equipment that would like bale hay. And again, it was all wheel driven. And the horses would pull it. So he'd got there and bale everything up. Meanwhile, my cousins and I were like doing chores around the farm. And then it'd get to the point where, we'd have to go out with a big trailer and collect all the hay bales and then take them back and, load them up in the barn. And man, I thought that was the coolest shit ever. But I mean, he
Yeah.
he would work like a regular 40, 50 hour work week. And he was doing night shift at a pigment factory, and he retired from there recently. But during the day, he was farming all day and then working all night. I don't know when he ever slept. But he did this for a number of years, and now that he's retired, that's like his full-time gig. And he just wakes up every day and farms, and he loves it. And he's got goats and chickens. I mean, he does his own. He raises his own livestock, and they slaughter it. They got a slaughterhouse right there on the property. He does beekeeping. He does blacksmithing. But he's got to know a little bit about a lot of things because things break on the farm. He's got to go out and fix it. He does maple syrup, so he'll
Yeah.
fell all the trees in the summer and then split everything up so that he's probably got like 10 or 15 cords of wood that he'll blow through come syrup season, and he just makes 100% natural maple syrup the way that it was made, hundreds of years ago.
Yep, man, that's funny. Everything you just described sounds like you're living in Vermont because that's literally the guys that I work with. They do all of that stuff on the side,
Hmm.
and it's funny. Like I work with guys who farm on the side, raising beef cattle and doing maple syrup, sugaring they call it, and they make more money doing that stuff than they do at work. They just come to work because we have health insurance.
Right. Yeah, maple
Yeah,
syrup's
that's
freaking
funny.
expensive, man. Like actual, I can't remember
Yeah,
what he charges for it, but it's not cheap, and he sells out every single year.
yeah, and there's actually a lot of welding work in that too. A lot of the piping for that is
Oh
stainless
yeah,
and like the big stainless tanks. I know some people that's like a big part of their income every year is repairing stainless stuff for just the maple sugar industry in
oh,
Vermont.
I could see
So
that.
yeah, that's funny.
Yeah, because it's all straight
Yeah,
heat. I mean, it's just getting freaking blasted. Because I guess you can make. I think it's like it's a 50-to-1 ratio. So for every 50 gallons of sap you put in, you get about 1 gallon of actual maple syrup. And it's just got
yeah,
you've seen them, right? You're up in Vermont, but for those that haven't, it's kind of like a channel. So it's got to go back and forth the whole way that it's coming down. It's constantly being heated, and it's just burning off all the moisture, and then you get syrup at the end. It's like a
yeah.
little
It's
raceway.
a big it's like a big industry here, and it's some of the guys will get more modern and burn propane or burn oil. But like you were saying, a lot of the guys that I work with, they're right now they're spending their weekend chopping firewood for next sugaring season.
Yep.
So yeah, it's a big thing.
Yeah, and they blow through wood quick because he's got like all these blowers and stuff hooked up to it.
Oh
So
yeah,
it's just he's constantly cranking.
yeah, yeah. That's funny. I was actually stacking some firewood earlier. I'm getting next year. I try to stay a year ahead, but yeah, I put a wood stove in my house up here. I love
Yeah, I don't have to worry about that down here.
it.
I need a more efficient way to
Yeah,
cool the air.
you guys got the opposite problem.
Yeah, it's too damn hot. I mean, like last week it was 104 degrees, and I was like, "Shit, it's way too early to start dealing with this." It's no, it's freaking,
Yeah.
it's May. I'm not ready for this.
Yeah, I got my jorts out for the first time today. So,
Well, damn,
yeah.
dude, it's been a pleasure chatting with you. Where can people find you? I know you don't do a whole lot of social media.
Yeah, I'm kind of like anti social media, but I do use LinkedIn. That's pretty much the only thing. It's just my name, Jesse Perrone, on there. And I try to post just like work related stuff. There's definitely like a lot of politics and other things on that platform, and I try to stay away from all that stuff. But yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, cool. Hopefully you'll be able to find some. I know LinkedIn's really big for like networking and employment opportunities and stuff like that. So maybe there's some inspection type jobs up there in Vermont you just haven't found yet.
I've seen a few postings in New England for sure. There's definitely like it seems like there's a lot of call outs for like contract work for inspectors,
Hmm.
which like sometimes I in the back of my mind I'm like maybe I'll just put a feeler out there and send an email and see what they say. But I don't know if I ever took like I'd show up and everyone would know that I don't know what I'm doing. You know what I mean? So, but no, you're definitely right though. There is a big community of CWIs on there, and there's a lot of people sharing job postings, and it seems like there's a lot of jobs. It definitely seems I see just as many postings for CWIs as I do for welders. I'd have to imagine there's a shortage of CWIs, the same that there is welders too.
Yeah, I get a couple job offers. Well, not job offers, but like opportunities to apply for several companies every week. Like I don't do a whole lot of LinkedIn, but usually when I go in there, there's a bunch of messages about inviting me to apply for specific positions based off of the information that I have listed in my profile and the people that
Yep.
have endorsed you and stuff like that. So it's I mean, if you're looking for work, or you're wanting to build a network in the community, like LinkedIn is a really solid place to do that. I mean, it's mostly companies. It's a professional, it's a professional social media site for the most part.
Yeah, yeah. I didn't really know anything about it, and I just happened to kind of stumble into it, and now I'm like kind of getting a little too into it. I'm like, all right, maybe I should back off a little bit. But it definitely is more professional, I would say, and that's kind of I don't know. That's my gripe with social media is I feel like it's just ruining society. So
Yeah, you're
like,
not wrong.
I don't want to get too wrapped up in it, but yeah,
Yeah. Well, again, man, it was an absolute pleasure chat with you. Hopefully, we can link up at some point. I don't know if you do fab tech or anything like that, or I'm sure if you go to any seminars or conferences or something, we'll probably bump into each other.
Yeah, I would love to do stuff like that. I try, like I've gone to a few of the AWS like regional meetings and stuff like that. I'd love to go to the conventions and Fab Tech and stuff like that, and like walk around and pretend I'm smarter than I am. But I'm usually stuck working overtime and stuff. I don't know, but I'd love to go and see some of that stuff.
Yeah, have your
For
company
sure.
see if your company will send you out for training. Take look into Walt Spurko's class for the ASME Section 9 because they talk about
Yeah.
plastic welding and that too for plastic piping and stuff. I didn't realize that
All
was in
right.
the ASME book, and we were going through. I took his class a couple years ago down in Houston, and I was like, plastic? Why the hell do I need to know about plastic? Like, there's plastic welding. I mean, case in point, you're doing some of it right there where you're at, and it's all piping related.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that. That's one thing they are big on. They're definitely big on like training me, and they do offer to like I mentioned I want to take like the API 1159, I think it was, for like pipeline construction inspection.
Okay.
And I mentioned it, and they were like, "Yeah, we'll pay for it, no problem." They were like all about it.
Yeah.
So
Hop on that, man. Good
yeah,
stuff.
I'll have to get into that.
All right, ladies and gents, I hope you all enjoyed the show. If you're finding these episodes beneficial to your welding journey, please leave me a review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and consider sharing the episodes with a friend. You can also stream episodes directly from my website, arcjunkies.com, and feel free to hit me up with any questions, comments, or concerns by sending an email to show@arcjunkies.com. I hope you all have a great rest of your week. Stay safe out there, and until next time, make every weld better than your last.